Step away from my car. Marcus Reed's voice cut through the darkness at exactly 5:12 on a cold Tuesday morning, calm enough to sound almost unreal. The woman beside his black sedan froze with one gloved hand raised, a can of red spray paint hissing between her fingers. Under the pale glow of the street lamp, fresh paint crawled across the driver's side door in thick, ugly letters. The chemical smell hung sharp in the air, mixing with wet pavement and the faint smoke of someone's fireplace 2 houses down. Linda Harper turned slowly. Her white raincoat shone beneath the porch lights, spotless except for a red mist along one sleeve. For half a second, neither of them moved. Marcus stood at the end of his driveway in dark slacks, a charcoal overcoat and polished shoes, holding the worn leather briefcase he carried every morning. He looked at the paint, then at the can, then at Linda. "Put it down," he said. Linda's eyes widened, not with shame but calculation. The can slipped from her hand and struck the pavement with a metallic clatter. Red paint sprayed across the curb. Then she screamed, "Help! He's threatening me!" Porch lights snapped on one after another. Curtains shifted. A dog began barking behind a wooden fence. Marcus did not step closer. He set his briefcase on the ground and raised both hands where she could see them. "I haven't touched you," he said. "You were damaging my car." Linda backed toward the sidewalk, pressing one hand dramatically against her chest. "Stay away from me!" she shouted, louder now, making sure every neighbor heard. A bedroom window opened across the street. Someone called out, asking what was happening. Linda answered before Marcus could speak. "I caught him acting suspicious and he came after me." Marcus stared at her. The accusation landed harder than the sight of the paint. 3 months in Hawthorne Ridge had taught him how quickly a quiet street could turn into a courtroom when fear chose its witness. He reached slowly toward his coat pocket. Linda flinched. "He's reaching for something," she yelled. Marcus stopped. "My phone," he said. "I'm calling the police." "I already did," Linda replied, and for the first time, her voice dropped low enough that only he could hear. "They know me." A distant siren rose beyond the neighborhood, faint but growing. Linda's expression changed for only a moment. The panic disappeared. In its place was something colder, something satisfied. Marcus glanced down at the red letters spreading across the black door, their edges beginning to drip in the damp morning air. He noticed the gloves on Linda's hands, the hood pulled over her hair, the license plate of her SUV covered with a folded towel. This had not been anger. It had been preparation. The siren grew louder. Blue light flickered against the houses at the end of the block. Marcus lifted his hands again as the patrol car turned onto the street. Linda stepped into the center of the sidewalk, trembling on command. By the time the officer opened his door, she was already crying. The patrol car rolled to a stop beside the curb, washing the quiet houses in alternating blue and white light. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out, one hand resting near his radio as he studied the scene. Linda moved toward him first. She spoke quickly, her voice shaking in all the right places, saying Marcus had startled her, raised his voice and advanced toward her in the dark. Marcus remained beside his driveway with both hands visible. The cold air pressed through his overcoat, carrying the bitter smell of paint across the lawn. He knew better than to interrupt. He had spent most of his life watching how people filled silence with whatever story made them feel safest. 3 months earlier, Marcus had arrived at Hawthorne Ridge in a moving truck with no entourage, no expensive furniture, and no interest in explaining himself. He had chosen the neighborhood because it was 12 minutes from the federal courthouse and quiet enough for him to hear himself think after long days. His brick house sat near the end of the block beneath 2 old maple trees. The kitchen still held unpacked boxes. The living room had 1 couch, a reading lamp, and framed photographs resting on the floor because he had not found time to hang them. Every weekday, he left before sunrise carrying the same weathered leather briefcase his father had given him after law school. He drove a 7-year-old sedan, trimmed his own hedges, and brought his trash bins in before breakfast. To most of the neighborhood, he was simply the reserved black man in number 42. Marcus preferred it that way. He had learned that titles changed how people listened, but they rarely changed what people believed when no title was visible. On his first Saturday in the neighborhood, He had helped 80-year-old Rafael Alvarez carry 3 bags of groceries from the curb after the older man twisted his ankle. The next week, Marcus repaired a loose board on the shared fence without asking for payment. When a delivery driver left a package at the wrong house, Marcus walked it 2 blocks in the rain. He did these things quietly, not because he wanted gratitude, but because decency had been the clearest rule his mother ever gave him. Linda had noticed him differently. Her first letter arrived 4 days after he moved in, warning that his trash container had remained visible 11 minutes beyond the neighborhood deadline. The second complained about a sedan parked outside his home during a visit from his younger sister. The third mentioned noise, though Marcus had spent that evening alone reading in complete silence. Each envelope carried the seal of the Hawthorne Ridge Homeowners Association and Linda Harper's signature, beneath the words Community Standards Chair. Marcus answered every notice politely. He kept copies. He attended one meeting and asked why certain rules seemed to be enforced against some residents more often than others. Linda smiled across the polished table and told him he was misunderstanding the neighborhood culture. Now, standing beneath the flashing lights, Marcus watched that same smile disappear behind carefully practiced fear. Officer Brooks glanced at the painted car, then at the red stain near Marcus's driveway. His gaze moved to the spray can lying between them. "Sir," he said, "I need you to keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus did not argue. Across the street, curtains parted wider. Linda wrapped her arms around herself and looked away, but Marcus caught the brief lift at the corner of her mouth. The neighborhood had finally awakened. It simply had not decided whose story to believe. Officer Brooks asked Linda to stand near the hood of the patrol car while he took her statement. She nodded quickly, drawing the white raincoat tighter around herself as though the cold had suddenly become unbearable. Her voice lowered into a careful rhythm. She said she had been out for an early walk. She said she had noticed movement near Marcus's driveway. She said she had only approached because she cared about neighborhood safety. Each sentence was neat, polished, and ready for an official report. Marcus listened from several feet away, his hands still visible, while the blue light moved across the wet street and turned every window into a watching eye. Linda Harper had built her authority one meeting at a time. She was not the wealthiest person in Hawthorne Ridge, and she did not own the largest house, but for 8 years she had controlled the homeowners association with the precision of someone guarding a private border. She decided which complaints reached a vote, which exceptions deserved approval, and which residents needed reminders about community standards. At meetings, she sat at the center of the long table beneath the framed neighborhood charter, tapping a silver pen against a yellow legal pad, while others waited for permission to speak. She knew who had replaced a roof without the correct shade of shingles. She knew whose teenager parked too close to a mailbox. She knew which families could be embarrassed into compliance, and which ones would receive a friendly warning over coffee. Her power did not come from law. It came from certainty. From the way she spoke as though every preference were a rule and every rule carried the weight of law. When Marcus first attended a meeting, Linda had looked at him with the pleasant expression she used when correcting service workers. The discussion that evening concerned a proposed security policy, requiring residents to report unfamiliar vehicles and suspicious visitors. Marcus had read the document twice before raising his hand. He asked how the board planned to define unfamiliar. He asked who would decide whether a person looked suspicious. He asked why the policy allowed anonymous complaints without evidence. The room had shifted. Chairs creaked. Eyes lowered. Linda smiled and told him the policy was meant to protect everyone. Marcus replied that a rule without clear standards rarely protected everyone equally. He did not raise his voice. That seemed to bother her more. The proposal was delayed after 2 other residents supported his concerns. Linda never forgot the moment. Over the following weeks, notices arrived with increasing frequency. A recycling bin visible from the sidewalk. A porch light described as unusually bright. A guest car parked legally but deemed inconsistent with neighborhood appearance. Marcus answered with dates, photographs, and copies of the association bylaws. Linda answered with silence, then another complaint. Now Officer Brooks stood between them holding a small notebook. "Miss Harper," he said, "how did the spray paint get on your sleeve?" Linda looked down as though she had not noticed it before. A faint red cloud marked the cuff of her white coat. I must have brushed against the car when he frightened me, she said. Marcus's gaze moved to the folded towel covering the license plate of her sport utility vehicle, then to the gloves, then to the dark canvas bag resting behind a hedge 10 feet from where she stood. The bag had not been there yesterday. One corner remained open, revealing the silver top of another spray can. Marcus said nothing yet. Linda followed his eyes and saw it too. For the first time that morning, the confidence in her face slipped. Marcus shifted his attention from the canvas bag to Officer Brooks, but he kept his voice even. There may be additional evidence near the hedge, he said. Linda answered before the officer could turn. That is not mine. The speed of her denial sharpened the silence. Officer Brooks looked toward the bag, then back at her. I did not ask whose it was. Linda pressed her lips together. Marcus could hear the faint ticking of the patrol car engine, and the soft hiss of paint still settling on the pavement. His phone remained in his coat pocket. The battery had been nearly empty when he left the house, but he had managed to activate the voice recorder the moment he saw Linda beside the sedan. He had not checked whether it was still running. He did not want to reach for it without permission. Officer, Marcus said, I would like to retrieve my phone slowly. It contains a recording that may help clarify what happened. Officer Brooks watched him for a moment, then nodded. Use your right hand. Move slowly. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and removed the phone between 2 fingers. The screen glowed weakly at 1%. A red timer showed that the recording was still active. Linda saw it and stepped forward. He has been recording me without consent. We are standing on a public street, Marcus replied. And you were on my property. His tone remained calm, but the words landed with the clean weight of fact. Officer Brooks held out his hand. Marcus passed him the phone. The officer stopped the recording and glanced at the screen. We will review this, he said. Linda looked toward the bag again. Marcus noticed the movement. She noticed that he noticed. A curtain opened farther across the street, and Rafael Alvarez appeared on his porch in a gray sweater, one hand resting on his cane. He did not call out. He simply watched. Officer Brooks walked to the hedge and crouched beside the canvas bag. Inside were 2 unopened cans of red spray paint, a roll of tape, a second pair of disposable gloves, and a folded sheet of paper. He lifted the paper by one corner. It contained a rough sketch of Marcus's driveway and notes marking the position of the streetlight and nearby doorbell cameras. Linda's face lost color. I have never seen that before, she said. Someone is setting me up. Marcus looked at the towel covering her vehicle's rear license plate. Then perhaps the officer should ask why your plate is concealed. Linda turned toward her sport utility vehicle as though seeing the towel for the first time. That must have blown there. There was no wind. The maple branches above them hung perfectly still. Officer Brooks rose and studied the towel, the bag, and the red stain on Linda's sleeve. His posture changed. The easy assumption in his face gave way to caution. Miss Harper, he said, I need you to remain where you are. Linda's voice tightened. You know who I am. I have worked with this neighborhood for years. That is not what I asked, he replied. Marcus heard a soft chime from his phone in the officer's hand. The battery warning flashed. Then the screen went dark. Linda exhaled, almost relieved. But Marcus had already seen the recording icon. More importantly, he had seen the bag, the covered plate, and the way Linda had prepared every detail except the possibility that he would come outside early. Officer Brooks reached for his radio and requested another unit. Linda stared at Marcus across the wet driveway. The performance had not vanished completely, but the confidence behind it had begun to crack. Marcus did not smile. He did not need to. For the first time that morning, the evidence was speaking louder than she was. The second patrol car arrived less than 3 minutes later, but the situation had already begun to tilt in a direction Linda had not prepared for. Officer Brooks spoke quietly with the responding sergeant while Marcus stood near the curb, his hands lowered now but still visible. Linda kept repeating that the bag was not hers, that the towel on her license plate was a coincidence, that Marcus had misunderstood everything. Each explanation came faster than the one before it. Then she changed her story. She said she had approached the car because she believed someone else had been vandalizing it. She said the spray paint on her sleeve came from trying to stop the damage. She said Marcus had startled her before she could explain. Officer Brooks looked down at his notes. Earlier, you said you were only taking a walk. Linda blinked. I was. Then I saw something. You also said you brushed against the car after he frightened you. That is what happened. But now you are saying you touched the paint while trying to stop someone else. Her mouth opened but no answer came. Marcus watched the exchange without satisfaction. He had seen enough courtrooms to know that a lie rarely collapsed all at once. It weakened at the edges first. A missing detail. A changed timeline. A sentence spoken too quickly. Linda looked toward the houses, searching for familiar faces. Ask anyone here, she said. They know me. They know what kind of person I am. The words moved through the cold air and seemed to settle over the neighbors watching from porches and windows. No one answered. Then a man in a navy robe stepped outside and said he had heard Linda arguing near Marcus's driveway before the sirens arrived. A woman across the street called out that Linda's sport utility vehicle had been parked with its lights off for nearly 20 minutes. Rafael Alvarez remained silent on his porch, but his eyes stayed fixed on the scene. Linda's face tightened. They are confused, she said. It was dark. Officer Brooks handed Marcus's phone to the sergeant. Battery is dead, but he says there is an audio recording. The sergeant examined the device, then placed it inside a clear evidence pouch. We can retrieve it later. Linda stepped closer. You cannot take his word over mine. The sergeant turned toward her. We are not taking anyone's word. We are preserving evidence. That answer changed something in her. The fear she had performed gave way to anger. She pointed at Marcus. He has been trying to cause trouble since he moved here. He challenged the association. He accused us of discrimination. Now this happens. Marcus felt every face turn toward him. Officer Brooks looked at the red paint on the sedan, then at Marcus. Did you spray the vehicle yourself? The question was quiet, almost procedural, but it struck with the full weight of suspicion. Linda saw the opening and rushed into it. Exactly. He wants attention. He wants to make us look racist. Marcus drew a slow breath. I did not damage my own property. Then why is there paint on your hand? Officer Brooks asked. Marcus looked down. A thin red streak crossed two fingers where he had picked up the can before setting it back on the pavement. Linda's expression shifted. The small smile returned. There, she said. That is proof. The street went still. The evidence that had begun to expose her now turned toward him. Officer Brooks asked Marcus to step away from the vehicle. Marcus complied. The sergeant moved behind him and explained that he was being temporarily detained, while they sorted out the conflicting statements. Cold metal closed around his wrists, firm but controlled. Marcus did not resist. He looked once at the paint running down the black door, then at Linda standing beneath the flashing lights. Her shoulders relaxed. For the first time since the officers arrived, she looked completely calm. Rain began as a fine mist, barely visible until it crossed the patrol lights and turned silver in the air. Marcus sat in the back seat of the first police car with his hands secured in front of him, his shoulders straight, his breathing measured. The interior smelled faintly of vinyl, coffee, and cold metal. Outside the window, red paint thinned beneath the rain and traveled down the side of his sedan in narrow streams. The letters blurred at the edges, but they did not disappear. Linda stood beneath the awning of a nearby porch, protected from the weather by a neighbor who had brought her an umbrella. She spoke softly now, nodding as though she had survived something frightening. Marcus watched her reflection in the glass instead of looking at her directly. He had learned long ago that anger could become evidence against the person who had the greatest reason to feel it. So he remained still. He counted each breath. For seconds in. For seconds out. Across the street, Rafael Alvarez stepped off his porch and moved slowly toward Officer Brooks. The older man carried his cane in one hand and a small tablet in the other. Before he reached them, the front door of Linda's house opened. Emily Harper hurried down the walkway wearing gray sweatpants, a university sweatshirt, and slippers that darkened immediately in the wet grass. Her hair was loosely tied, and confusion marked her face. "Mom!" she called. Linda turned sharply. "Go back inside." Emily slowed, taking in the patrol cars, the officers, the painted vehicle, and Marcus behind the glass. What happened? There was an incident, Linda said. I am handling it. Emily looked at her mother's white raincoat. The red stain on the cuff had spread beneath the moisture. Then she noticed the dark canvas bag near the hedge, now surrounded by small yellow evidence markers. Her expression changed. Linda followed her gaze. Someone left that there, she said quickly. Emily did not answer. She stepped closer and saw the folded towel still covering the license plate of her mother's sport utility vehicle. The towel was monogrammed with the Harper family initial. A single embroidered letter, dark blue against white fabric, was visible beneath the rain. Emily's eyes lifted to her mother. Linda looked away. Inside the patrol car, Marcus felt the handcuffs press against his wrists each time he shifted. The discomfort was small compared with the weight of being watched by people who had already begun choosing what to believe. He looked down at his hands. The red mark on 2 fingers had faded to pink where the rain had touched it before he was placed inside the car. He thought about his mother teaching him to polish his shoes before church, even when no one would notice. She used to tell him that dignity was what remained when other people refused to give you respect. Marcus had believed her then. He needed to believe her now. Outside, Emily moved closer to Linda's vehicle. Through the rear window, she saw an open cardboard box on the floor. Several receipts rested on top. One showed a purchase from a hardware store the previous evening. Red spray paint. Disposable gloves. Painter's tape. Emily pressed one hand against the wet glass. Her face went pale. Linda reached for her arm, but Emily stepped back. Do not, she whispered. It was the first honest fear Marcus had heard all morning. Not fear of him. Fear of the truth. Raphael finally reached Officer Brooks and raised the tablet. You should see this, he said. The rain tapped softly against the patrol car roof. Marcus closed his eyes for one brief second. Somewhere beyond the glass, the story was beginning to change. Officer Brooks took the tablet from Rafael Alvarez and angled it beneath the porch light. Rain dotted the screen, but the image remained clear. The recording began at 5 minutes before Marcus had stepped outside. Linda's sport utility vehicle rolled slowly into view with its headlights off. She parked near the corner, stepped out wearing the same white raincoat, and crossed the street carrying the dark canvas bag. The camera captured her pausing beneath the maple tree, checking both directions, then moving toward Marcus's sedan. Officer Brooks watched without speaking. The sergeant leaned closer. On the screen, Linda pulled on gloves, removed a spray can, and began painting the driver's side door. There was no unknown person, no struggle, no confusion, only preparation. When Marcus appeared at the edge of the frame, Linda dropped the can and immediately raised her voice. The recording carried every word. Help! He is threatening me. Marcus's response followed, calm and distant. I have not touched you. The sergeant replayed that moment once, then again. Across the street, neighbors stepped closer beneath umbrellas. Linda stood very still. The confidence in her face did not collapse dramatically. It drained away piece by piece, leaving only the pale realization that the street had heard the truth. That camera angle does not show everything, she said. Raphael looked at her with tired disappointment. It shows enough. Emily remained beside her mother's vehicle, staring through the rear window at the hardware store receipt. Her hands trembled as she opened the unlocked passenger door and reached inside. Linda moved toward her. Emily, leave that alone. Officer Brooks lifted one hand. Miss Harper, stay where you are. Emily pulled the receipt from the box. Beneath it lay another pair of gloves, a roll of painter's tape, and a small notebook. She opened it slowly. Several pages contained dates, license plate numbers, and notes about Marcus's schedule. One line read, leaves at 5:15 most mornings. Another read, no cameras on his garage. Emily looked at her mother as though she were seeing a stranger. You planned this, she said. Linda's voice softened. You do not understand. I was protecting the neighborhood. From what? Emily asked. Linda looked toward Marcus in the patrol car but did not answer. That silence said more than any confession. The sergeant walked to the vehicle and opened the rear door. Cool rain drifted inside. Mr. Reed, he said, we are removing the restraints. Marcus stepped out while Officer Brooks unlocked the handcuffs. The metal released with a small click. He rubbed one wrist once, then lowered his hands. No one met his eyes. Not the neighbors who had watched. Not the officer who had questioned him. Not Linda. Raphael did. The older man gave a quiet nod. Marcus returned it. Officer Brooks apologized, but Marcus answered only, "Preserve every item and document every statement." His voice carried the steady authority of someone familiar with procedure. The sergeant studied him more carefully now. "Have we met before?" Marcus looked toward the ruined paint on his car. "Not here." At that moment, a black government sedan turned onto Hawthorne Lane and stopped behind the patrol cars. A man in a dark suit stepped out holding an umbrella. He scanned the scene, saw Marcus, and hurried forward. "Judge Reed," he called. "The courthouse has been trying to reach you." The neighborhood fell silent. Linda's eyes widened. Officer Brooks straightened. Emily closed the notebook against her chest. Marcus did not look pleased by their surprise. He looked tired. The title changed the way they saw him, but it did not change what had happened. He turned to the sergeant and spoke quietly. "Do not handle this differently because of who I am." Then he looked at Linda for the first time since the video had played. "Handle it correctly because of what she did." The rain eased to a steady whisper as the sergeant asked Linda to place her hands where he could see them and step toward the second patrol car. She looked first at Officer Brooks, then at the neighbors gathered beneath porches and umbrellas, searching for someone who might still speak on her behalf. No one did. Her eyes finally settled on Marcus. The anger had left her face. What remained was fear, not of him, but of consequence. "Judge Reed," she said, her voice barely carrying across the driveway, "please, we can handle this privately." Marcus stood beside his damaged sedan while the courthouse driver held an umbrella over him. Red water continued to trail down the black door and gather along the curb. He looked at Linda for a long moment. "You did not damage my car because of my position," he said. "You damaged it because you believed I had no position at all." Linda lowered her eyes. Emily closed the notebook against her chest. Her expression strained with embarrassment and grief. "I did not know who you were," Linda whispered. "That is the problem," Marcus replied. The words were quiet, but they reached every person on the street. Officer Brooks stepped forward and explained that Linda was being taken in for questioning, while the evidence was reviewed. Marcus immediately raised one hand. "This matter must be assigned outside my district," he said. "I am the victim, and my office cannot have any influence over the investigation." The sergeant nodded. "Understood." Marcus continued. "Every recording, statement, receipt, and item must be logged. No shortcuts. No special treatment for her, and none for me." Linda looked up at him, confused by the absence of revenge. She had expected anger. She had prepared herself for public humiliation once his title became known. Instead, Marcus was protecting the process that would hold her accountable. That restraint seemed to unsettle her more than punishment spoken in rage. Emily crossed the wet pavement toward him. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have noticed what she was doing before this morning." Marcus glanced at the notebook in her hands. "You noticed when it mattered." Emily swallowed. "I am studying law. I thought I understood fairness." "Understanding fairness is easy when it costs nothing," Marcus said. "The test comes when the truth belongs to someone you love." She looked back at her mother. Linda stood beside the patrol car, no longer performing fear, no longer directing the street. For the first time, she seemed smaller than the authority she had claimed for years. Emily handed the notebook to the sergeant. "I want this included," she said. Linda closed her eyes. Marcus felt no victory in the moment, only the quiet relief that one person had chosen truth over loyalty to a lie. Officer Brooks approached him after Linda was placed in the patrol car. "Judge Reed, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions." Marcus looked at the officer's rain-darkened uniform, then at the handcuffs hanging from his belt. "An apology matters," he said. "What you do differently tomorrow matters more." Officer Brooks nodded slowly. Rafael Alvarez stood nearby with his tablet tucked beneath his sweater. Marcus thanked him for coming forward. Rafael shook his head. "You helped me when no one was watching. This was the least I could do." The second patrol car pulled away, its lights fading at the end of Hawthorne Lane. The neighbors remained silent. Marcus turned toward his car and ran one finger just above the ruined paint without touching it. The words were blurred now, almost unreadable beneath the rain, but their meaning had already been exposed. Behind him, Emily began collecting the Homeowners Association notices scattered from Linda's open vehicle. One by one, the papers softened in the water. Marcus picked up his worn leather briefcase from the driveway. The courthouse sedan waited. He could have left without another word, but before stepping inside, he looked back at the street. "Justice is not knowing the right person," he said. "It is doing the right thing before you know who anyone is." Then he closed the car door, leaving the neighborhood to face what it had finally seen. 3 months later, the first warm light of spring spread across Hawthorne Lane and rested on the maple trees above Marcus Reed's driveway. His sedan stood beneath them with a new black finish, polished until the morning sky appeared across the doors like still water. No red paint remained. No letters. No trace visible from the street. Yet the neighborhood had not forgotten. Linda Harper had resigned from the Homeowners Association before the outside prosecutor completed the case review. The court ordered restitution for the damaged car, community service, and participation in a civil rights education program. The decision came from a judge who had never met Marcus and worked in another district. Exactly as Marcus had requested. He did not attend the sentencing. He did not speak to reporters. When a local station left messages asking him to discuss the incident, he declined each one. He had never wanted revenge or attention. He had wanted the truth to receive the same respect it would have received if his title had been known from the beginning. The Homeowners Association met on a quiet Thursday evening, inside the neighborhood clubhouse. The long table where Linda had once controlled every discussion now held open copies of the bylaws, handwritten notes, and cups of cooling coffee. Emily Harper sat near the center, not in her mother's old chair, but beside Rafael Alvarez and 2 residents who had rarely spoken at meetings before. She proposed removing the anonymous suspicious activity policy and requiring documented evidence before any resident could be targeted by an association complaint. She also proposed an independent review of past notices to determine whether rules had been enforced unevenly. No one objected. Marcus sat near the back wall with his leather briefcase resting beside his chair. He listened without interrupting. When Emily finished, she looked toward him as though waiting for approval. Marcus gave a small nod, nothing more. The vote passed unanimously. Afterward, neighbors approached him one at a time. Some apologized for watching in silence that morning. Others admitted they had accepted Linda's version too quickly, because it had been easier than questioning someone they knew. Marcus thanked them, but he did not rescue them from their discomfort. An apology could open a door. Walking through it required more than words. Outside, the air smelled of fresh grass and damp soil. Raphael struggled with a paper grocery bag near the clubhouse steps, and Marcus reached for it before the older man could ask. Together they walked the short distance toward Raphael's house. The street was quiet except for birds in the trees and the distant hum of a lawn mower. At the end of Linda's driveway, a simple for sale sign stood in the grass. The curtains were open, but the rooms behind them looked empty. Emily remained in the neighborhood, living with a friend while finishing law school. She had begun volunteering at a legal aid clinic every Saturday. Marcus never asked whether guilt had led her there. The reason mattered less than the work. When they reached Raphael's porch, the bottom of the grocery bag tore. 2 apples rolled across the walkway. Marcus set down his briefcase, caught one with his shoe, and bent to retrieve the other from beneath the railing. Raphael smiled. "You are going to be late again, Judge." Marcus placed the apples back in the bag. "The courthouse will still be there." He carried the groceries inside, then returned to his driveway as the sun rose higher. For a moment, he stood beside the restored car and studied his reflection in the door. The surface was clean, but he could still remember the chemical smell, the rain against the patrol car roof, and the cold pressure around his wrists. He placed one hand on the roof, then looked down the street. Porch lights clicked off as morning fully arrived. Curtains opened without suspicion. A woman waved from across the road, and Marcus raised his hand in return. He unlocked the car, placed his worn leather briefcase on the passenger seat, and drove slowly toward the courthouse. Sunlight traveled across the new paint as he turned the corner. Behind him, Hawthorne Lane settled into silence, not the silence that protects a lie, but the silence that follows when justice has finally been heard.